You're watching World News Program with me, Mariam Zian. The headlines. New brutal massacres against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip accompany the ongoing ground assault on Gaza City. The Ministry of Health warns of a total collapse of the health system due to the ban on fuel entry. Coming up tonight, international organizations expressing solidarity with the Sahrawi people call for an end to the Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara. And Spain prepares for an international march in support of the Sahrawis. Next on developments in the Iranian nuclear file, Tehran warns that its agreement with the International Atomic Energy Agency will be considered void if it comes under attack. In a phone call with his European Troika counterparts, Araghchi confirms his country's readiness to reach a fair and balanced solution. And in Ukraine, a Russian attack cuts electricity and disrupts railways in the country's center. The Kremlin responds to European Commission threats, stressing that the continuation of sanctions will not affect Russia's stance. Meanwhile, Zelensky announces that Kiev has obtained air defense missiles as part of the first U.S. supplies under a new mechanism. Hello and welcome back to your night news. First, in our file, at least 86 Palestinians from the Gaza Strip were martyred following Israeli bombardment since dawn on Wednesday. Health sources in Gaza reported that hospitals in the Strip received 86 bodies. More than 38 were transferred to Al-Shifa Hospital, while the rest were taken to Al-Quds, Al-Saraya, and Al-Auda hospitals. The same sources confirmed that more than 40 martyrs were from the North Gaza alone, killed in Israeli airstrikes and shelling. At least 15 displaced Palestinians were killed and 27 others injured when Israeli forces bombed civilians near the southern gate of the Shifa medical complex in western Gaza City. The death toll is expected to rise due to critical condition of many of the wounded. The Palestinian Ministry of Health also reported that Israeli forces bombed the Rantisi Children's Hospital in Gaza City 3 times during the night, despite the presence of 80 patients inside. The ministry condemned the attack as a crime that reflects Israel's systematic policy of crippling Gaza's health system, noting that the strikes targeted the upper floors of the Strip's only hospital, specializing in oncology, kidney dialysis, and respiratory and digestive diseases. The Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza warned of an imminent health and humanitarian catastrophe as Israel continues to obstruct World Health Organization efforts to deliver fuel to hospitals. These could bring medical services to a halt within days. In a statement Wednesday, the ministry said the shortage threatens to shut down vital facilities, including the Al-Sahaba Medical Complex and ambulance services. It warned that the suspension of the central oxygen station and emergency vehicles would lead to a grave disaster.
The Zionist occupation deliberately thwarts the attempts of the World Health Organization to deliver fuel to hospitals in Gaza Governorate. It insists on preventing the World Health Organization from using alternative routes to deliver fuel to hospitals in Gaza and the north. Preventing the supply of the necessary fuel for running the generators in Gaza hospitals means the complete cessation of health services. The crisis threatens the shutdown of the Al-Sahaba Medical Complex, the public service hospital, the central oxygen station, ambulances, and other hospitals that will stop operating in just a few days. The shutdown of the central oxygen station and ambulances in Gaza Governorate means we are facing a serious health and humanitarian disaster.
The Gaza Telecommunications Regulatory Authority confirmed the cutoff of internet and landline services across wide areas of Gaza and its northern governorates amid intensified Israeli military escalation. In a statement on Wednesday, the authority announced a new blackout of internet communication services in the Strip caused by the ongoing Israeli assault and its targeting of main new network routes, a move that will further hinder the flow of information and humanitarian relief to civilians. The Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor said the use of booby-trap vehicles by Israeli forces in Gaza not only destroys neighborhoods and causes mass displacement, but also serves as a systematic tool of psychological terror against civilians. In a statement on Wednesday, the Monitor noted that each vehicle can completely or partially demolish around 20 housing units, putting hundreds of thousands of Palestinians at risk of losing their homes in the short term. It documented Israel's detonation of 10 such vehicles on Wednesday alone, deployed as robots among residential homes in southern Tell el-Hawa, along with at least 3 others in the Nafaq Street and around the vicinity of Sheikh Radwan in northern Gaza City. UNICEF spokesperson Tess Ingram said that the mass forced displacement of families is a deadly threat to the most vulnerable groups. In a press statement, the UNICEF spokesperson stressed that Palestinian families and their hungry children are being pushed southward, quote, from one hell to another, end of quote, adding that it is inhumane to expect nearly 500,000 children who have endured violence and psychological trauma over more than 700 days of continuous conflict to flee one hell only to end up in another. And as the occupation escalates its aggression against the besieged Gaza Strip following the incursion of its forces by land and the intensification of its airstrikes on the city, forcing its residents to flee, hospitals have become a haven for the sick and wounded fleeing death. Usama Ayadi.
Gaza City hospitals standing as the last stronghold of steadfastness in the face of the ongoing Zionist genocide, where doctors wage daily battles in clinics on the verge of collapse. Amidst the overcrowded halls of the remaining functioning hospitals in the northern Gaza Strip, medical teams strive to care for the injured, many of whom are on the verge of death, without surrendering to the oppression of the occupation.
تدمير كبير قصف عنيف جدا
مع الإخلاءات المتكررة في قطاع غزة.
With the repeated evacuations in the Gaza Strip and most hospitals going out of service, like the Baptist Hospital now, the influx of patients and the injured to El Shifa Hospital is increasing. Of course, as you can see, the numbers are huge, and the people are in the beds. There are not enough beds for the patients, and we are forced to treat the patients on the floor.
Here at Al Shifa Hospital, the wounded lie on the floor, with no beds or space for steps. Every corner embraces a bleeding body, and every corridor has been transformed into an alternative treatment room. Patients and wounded are trapped within the triple threat of terror, hunger, and bombing. The scarcity of medical supplies in the city's hospitals has exceeded the limits of a crisis, reaching levels that can only be described as catastrophic.
While going home, I was shot in my leg. The situation in the hospital is very difficult. There are no doctors and no beds. I have been laying on the floor for an hour, unable to do anything.
The scene inside the stricken city's hospitals embodies the magnitude of the tragedy. Nothing can be heard but the groans of the wounded and the cries of doctors.
فالمستشفى الرنتيسي حالياً هي المستشفى الأطفال الرئيسي.
Al-Rantisi Hospital is currently the main children's hospital. We are getting patients not only from Al-Nasr or the north, but from everywhere. It became the main hospital. We are getting patients in large numbers, either normal cases or complicated cases. Some cases need at least 3 months of medical attention, follow-up, and medications.
As for the sick children of Gaza, that's another tragedy. The lives of most of them are at stake in light of the ongoing stifling blockade and the barbaric Zionist bombardment of the Strip. Despite the unprecedented suffering, doctors in Gaza's hospitals are struggling with meager resources and exhausted bodies, revealing an ongoing struggle against time to save whatever lives can be saved in a city that epitomizes pain and steadfastness.
Canada condemned the new ground assault launched by Israeli forces on Gaza City on Tuesday, describing it as horrific. In a post on X, the Canadian Foreign Ministry said the attack worsens the humanitarian crisis and jeopardizes the hostage release process. It added that Canada stands with its international partners in calling for an immediate and lasting ceasefire and the delivery of unrestricted humanitarian aid. Luxembourg Prime Minister Luc Frieden said Wednesday that his country will recognize the state of Palestine at the UN General Assembly in New York next week. Frieden made the announcement at a joint news conference with European Council President Antonio Costa, who strongly condemned the current actions taken by the Zionist government.
The Luxembourg government has decided to move towards recognizing the state of Palestine. We will make the official announcement on Monday, and I will do so in New York.
And more than 20 relief agencies called on world leaders to urgently intervene in response to the genocidal war in Gaza, warning that the situation in the Strip will become the deadliest in its history if no deterrent action is taken against Israel. In a letter to the United Nations, the relief agency said that the militarization of the aid system in Gaza is deadly, adding that thousands of Gazans are being shot at while trying to reach aid. International outrage is mounting against the Israeli occupation as the humanitarian crisis deepens and civilian deaths rise, with growing calls from global powers and regional blocs to end the war on Gaza. Nabil Khazini has the report.
While the occupation continues its genocidal war on Gaza, the world is watching and urging for an end to the violence. Across continents, from New York to Brussels to Beijing, leaders and citizens alike are demanding a ceasefire, fearing the conflict's toll on innocent life is becoming unbearable.
People are demanding answers and action. Actions that match the gravity of the challenges our world faces. Actions that meet the expectations of all those on the outside looking in. Let this be a week of solutions for peace.
But so far, calls have been more noise than actions. However, on Wednesday, the European Union unveiled its toughest plan yet to pressure the occupation, calling for increased tariffs on some goods coming from occupied Palestine. The EU also imposed sanctions targeting two key ministers in the occupation's government. The move comes as Palestinians continue to flee deeper into Gaza amid the ongoing war.
All member states agree that the situation in Gaza is untenable. The war needs to end. The suffering must stop and all hostages must be released. We must use all the tools we have towards this outcome.
Adding to the chorus of international alarm, China voiced its deep concern over the escalating conflict and urged the occupation to achieve a comprehensive and lasting ceasefire.
China firmly opposes Israel's escalation of military operations in Gaza, condemns all acts that harm civilians and violate international law, and is deeply concerned about the further escalation of tensions. China opposes any party fanning the flames. We urge Israel to heed the strong calls of the international community, immediately stop its military operations in Gaza, and achieve a comprehensive and lasting ceasefire as soon as possible to prevent a large-scale humanitarian crisis.
As the war rages on, the growing international pressure reflects a world increasingly unwilling to align with the aggressor. Yet despite mounting calls and bold sanctions for the millions suffering, a clear path to peace remains elusive.
At the UN in Geneva, Algeria, on behalf of the Arab group, condemned Israel's systematic policy of enforced disappearance against Palestinians. Calling it an international crime, Algeria urged UN mechanisms to uncover the fate of victims and pressed the world to act to end these violations.
We can see that the occupying power, Israel, has adopted a systematic policy of enforced disappearance against Palestinians. We condemn this crime against Palestinians. It is an international crime under the International Convention on Enforced Disappearance and Relative Geneva Convention.
International human rights organizations have urged the United Nations and the European Union to take urgent action and decisive action to end 5 decades of Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara. In a joint petition marking the 50th anniversary of what they call Morocco's illegal occupation, the European Association of Lawyers for Democracy and Human Rights and the Sahrawi group called for a referendum on self-determination for the Sahrawi people.
Western Sahara remains the last colony in Africa, and the advisory opinion issued by the International Court of Justice in 1975 affirms that Morocco holds no territorial sovereignty over Western Sahara. Accordingly, the colonization of Western Sahara must come to an end. Half a century of occupation has left devastating consequences, marked by grave human rights violations. Morocco continues to commit crimes against humanity, including arbitrary detention, killings, repression, and the use of drones against civilians, while activists and organizations such as members of Codissa are subjected to ongoing harassment.
The International Platform of Women for Western Sahara announced a new international march in October, starting from the Spanish city Seville and heading to the Sahrawi refugee camps. Scheduled for October 24 to November 2nd under the slogan "For the Freedom of the Sahrawi People, Not Another Year of Occupation," the march will coincide with the 50th anniversary of Morocco's occupation and the forced displacement of Sahrawis to the camps. Trade unions in Spain's Andalusia region have renewed their support for the Sahrawi people and their just cause. According to the Sahrawi news agency, the Polisario Front's representative in Andalusia, during meetings with Spanish unions, called for strengthening union action and intensifying trade union solidarity to denounce the occupation, demand the release of Sahrawi political prisoners in Moroccan jails, and enhance joint cooperation. Moving on to Iran, the Iranian Foreign Ministry confirmed that the framework for cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency signed in Cairo last week will end if hostile measures, such as the new imposition of new sanctions, are taken. At a press conference held in Tehran on Wednesday, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai said that the signatories' failure to adhere to their commitments and their attempts at blackmail will not force his country to adhere to the agreement.
The Islamic Republic of Iran has the right and authority to take countermeasures if the other parties fail to fulfill their mutual obligations or seek to pressure Iran through coercive means. Naturally, under these circumstances, and given that the nature of the issue will fundamentally change, no one can claim that Iran must remain committed to the agreement. The United States is not in a position to make decisions regarding Iran's national defense capabilities. The Islamic Republic of Iran is determined to preserve its independence at any cost, stand on its own 2 feet, and firmly resist the excessive demands, aggression, and hostile actions for foreign powers, including the United States and the Zionist regime.
The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi affirmed that Tehran is ready to reach a fair and balanced solution with the European Troika that guarantees the mutual interests of the two sides. In a phone call on Wednesday with the foreign ministers of Germany, Britain, and France, as well as the EU's foreign policy chief, Araghchi stressed the importance of maintaining an atmosphere of dialogue and diplomacy to prevent rising tensions. He pointed out that the step taken by the 3 European countries to reimpose sanctions previously lifted by the UN Security Council lacks any legal or logical justification. The U.S. State Department announced the designation of 4 Iraqi armed groups it said are allied with Iran on its list of terrorist organizations. In a statement, the department named the groups as Harakat al-Nujaba, Kataib Sayyid al-Shuhada, Harakat Ansar Allah al-Awfiya, Al-Kataib al-Imam Ali, accusing them of receiving direct support from Iran and enabling them to plan or carry out attacks against U.S. targets. The Russian Defense Ministry announced that its air defense systems intercepted and destroyed more than 350 Ukrainian drones overnight. In a statement, the ministry said the drones were destroyed over the regions of Rostov, Bryansk, Voronezh, and Kursk, in addition to a Ukrainian unmanned boat that was destroyed in the northwestern Black Sea. Meanwhile, Vladimir Rogov, a member of the administration in Zaporizhia, reported that Russian forces struck Ukrainian military transport equipment in the city of Zaporizhia. Russian forces carried out an overnight drone attack on Ukraine's Kirovohrad region, causing partial power outages and disruption of railway transport, according to local Ukrainian authorities. Kirovohrad Governor Andriy Raikovich said the attack cut off electricity to the regional center and 44 settlements, affecting basic services for residents. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Oleksiy Kuleba added that Russian forces targeted railway infrastructure in the overnight strike. And Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Wednesday that Europe's plans to rapidly phase out Russian energy and goods will not affect Moscow or alter its position. He stressed that 3 years of sanctions have already proven ineffective, responding to the European Commission's pledge to accelerate the phase-out of Russian fossil fuel imports.
We adhere to our position, remain open to negotiations, and emphasize that a political and diplomatic solution to Ukraine crisis is our preferred option. Therefore, our position here is well known and has not changed. The European Union and many individual European countries continue to pursue a hostile approach toward Russia. They mistakenly believe that the continuation of sanctions policy can somehow influence the position of the Russian Federation. Russia, which defends its national interests, is certainly not affected by these sanctions, and the past 3 years have clearly demonstrated this.
France is once again in turmoil. A week after the Shut Down Everything protests, fresh demonstrations are sweeping Paris and other cities, fueled not only by anger over austerity, but by growing doubts about the very future of the Fifth Republic. Marwa Balaiwer has more details.
France is in the middle of one of the biggest political shakeups of the Fifth Republic. What started as anger over reforms has now grown into a much bigger question. Is the system itself still working for the people? Back in 1958, Charles de Gaulle created the Fifth Republic to bring stability after years of turmoil. But fast forward to today, and that stability feels like it's slipping away. Emmanuel Macron's push for liberal reforms, from pensions to hospitals to schools, has left many French citizens feeling that their social safety net is crumbling. And the frustration is spilling out on the streets. Just a week after the Shut Everything Down protests, unions and opposition parties are back, calling for even larger demonstrations. The new Prime Minister, Sébastien Lecornu, is promising to scrap parts of the austerity plan, but critics say it's just the same old policies in a new package.
The Prime Minister remains far too vague about his intentions. We made it clear that if there is any effort to revive Beirut's policies, Parliament will impose strict oversight from the moment he delivers his general policy speech.
The bigger problem, analysts warn, is that this isn't just about budgets or reforms anymore. Under the Fifth Republic, every re-elected president has ended up stuck, losing control and losing trust. Macron looks to be on the same road. That's why more and more voices are now raising what was once unthinkable, the idea of moving toward a Sixth Republic. For many in France, the issue goes beyond a single reform or government. It strikes at the heart of democracy itself. And increasingly, a conviction is taking hold among protesters and opposition forces alike. France cannot move forward without the departure of President Emmanuel Macron.
And that's a wrap for tonight's edition. Thanks for watching and have a great night.